Plan. The United States government should establish a drop in renewable fuel standard, including equal greenhouse gas emission reduction targets for all renewable fuel production in the United States. Contingent 1 is solvency. The plan is going to create market space for dropping biofuels. Downline 13. Achieving green energy security. The drop in fuel will require a long-term commitment from the government given the time for research, development, commercialization, the current state place, low levels of development fuels compatible with petroleum infrastructure. The EIS can subject ethanol by establishing de facto carbon for corn ethanol, and by 0.7% by 20% reduction in greenhouse gas. However, EIS has increased additional ethanol given the standard for advanced biofuel and also ethanol. This also hurts the development of fuels because then artificial ethanol share the bargain fuel superior fuel. Should displace it if fuel into competition under RFS to driving to fuel would struggle to overly leverage the same should be the category production to the current standard establishing a new drop in new fuel standard. This would require all renewable fuels to close back for petroleum infrastructure. They start government presenting about over time. This increase at least 50% in regard to limiting greenhouse gas emissions and different products until segments of market. The current standard effectively locks in ethanol share price notice to improve emission standards. New drop stations have the equal greenhouse gas production for all fuels. And the industry more experienced fuel become more efficient, which means less emission drop in fuel with not having the same compatibility issues. Therefore, finding more ways to market as possible to decrease the industry gets more experience in production. Representative of large globalization comes to develop extra demand by the tax revenue is plus with the in. People are developing technology, but policy certainty is key to commercialization. Cross at all. 14. Dedicated policy for development commercialization will be needed before they will significant contribute to no policy to new drop fuels from less compatible biofuels and currently no such incentive to drop fuels. Their future growth is going to be the cost of available feedstock. Although federal government offices have considerable ongoing R&D standards on scale and countless issues. Thus, ultimate progress has been made. A support policy to specifically work further are needed to ensure commercial success and continue to its military readiness to internally first its naval power, its key to check great power, war resistance, cooperative security, McGrath 14. Sea power plays a critical role in the sustainment of the system by deterring shots Russia, China, openly challenge the force western democracy, the ground unconfident, and the system must send defender of sea power, must play a vital role in the safety value of naval force, counter cooperative security, while allies cannot do a say we must provide powers, but evidence that the current order will not be overturned. They set the stage for great power where the rules are over capacity, critical the ability to ram up when storm clouds gather, and naval focus around reduces security competition and ensures multilateral cooperation and adheres to the liberal world order. Finally, 12. The embrace of the Navy's cooperative strategy, the linking maritime power to the success of the international order. The Navy helps shape the country's political competence. The Navy ships and participate in more than 170 bilateral multilateral exercises. This allows us to respond quickly and efficiently multifaceted release operations, making it part of any multilateral maritime operation and positive some game partnership building a multilateral dispute resolution of the it must emphasize soft level of the deadline and partnership building operations with no power and the hard war funding, but future naval dependence in fossil fuels will hamstring its effectiveness. Chambers and UT11. The complexity of protecting American power have brought in the commodity rate costs that are increasingly associated with the use of fossil fuels dependence. They may be problem in that is crucial to develop the serious long-term approach for the American government as they hold specifically the Department of Defense increase by yield fossil fuel dependence as a national and international security vulnerability and cost prevents the adoption of drop-in biofuels. Fudge 13. The Navy needs to have an intention of petroleum aviation's goal to reduce use of fossil fuels into its algae to as a part of the said algae makes an ideal drop in fuel because it's basically the same as petroleum for the Navy cost of an issue. We're not going to buy large quantities of normal operations because the cost competitive product of the industry has to start building commercial facilities in the Navy is already pursuing drop in fuel, but congressional mandates hold it back because of Mizakami 16. The Navy wants to adjust the entail competition to run biofuels, but it was unable to secure a contract for drop in biofuels as a result. The airline still running official jet fuel. The goal has been to run money 50-50 blended dual possible, but the price per gallon is still above a congressional mandate to use blended fuels competitively to run the price. And then second lane internally gets overstretched, cost intervention in the Middle East overstretched US and Ottoman alliances were over in Thomas 14. In like the difference that you are running signal to allies a large force, maybe counteractive conventions that they offer security to the US or you uncontrolled to press retreat to Iraqi or using US support to settle schools with ethnic rebels by retaining intel and based on Washington reassuring local governments maintain counter Iranian missions at the center. They limited investment will serve as a reminder that the US does not have grandiose ambitions. They smaller presence in militarily and financially sustainable way of maintaining commitment. The plan is key to reduce US reliance on oil imports to draw less drawdown from non-central geopolitical regions like the Middle East. Down 13. Once drop in fuels become a critical mass of the transferring fuel market, oil from the Middle East may essentially decrease to the point where it's no longer necessary to maintain a large presence in the region. It's certainly cheaper so long as Congress follows the Navy's lead by definitely drop in fuels in it and overstretch is not inevitable. US hegemonic influence can be sustained through force without war as long as military superiority is maintained. Definitely 12. Military superiority allows the U.S. to emphasize force without war oppression. It allows us the U.S. to enforce provision security, even if the direct use of force prevails among this group of countries. Military force would still play an important political role. The American military is deterring Western allies that are ensuring access to crucial resources. Past hegemons to come to the imperial overstretch after wars against major powers in spending more than 10% of their GDPs on defense in the U.S. By contrast, 4% of GDP on defense. In contrast to the American on rogue nations and failed states, the U.S. has the advantage of being the accent hegemony did not overturn existing international order, rather the existing order collapsed around it. As a result, its dominant position is interested to the point of any effort to compete. Looking at the U.S. and fuel, so no one tries in. Hegemony reduces war across the board. Data proves Dresden 5. Studies found the number of wars World War I peaked in 1991 and 151 by 2004. The number had declined 20 in college studies. Named 1991 as a peak year for fighting given the year breaking in 179 by 2004. They stood at 65. This suggests the intentional global competence now less than half of what it was 15 years ago. The big reason for wars declining by a global hegemon called the United States. The reason why great powers belong to the United States is much more powerful than anyone else. Goldstein rather refers to the past 15 years as temporary Russian oil. Besides what would happen if U.S. hegemony were to fade in, the liberal order is the most effective Irish strategy. Instead of cooperation and strategic restraint, we're going to Chia and oil loving. In the international regimes can help states to effective coordinate policies in the production of international public goods, multilateral reduce competition over relative gains, advance international cooperation, institutionalized international setting can change states' interests and generate positive feedback with increased cooperation, transactional actors thrive, and advocate increased cooperation later. Officials delegation multilateral bodies, lock in domestic policies, and liberal democracy voluntarily bind themselves to global governance to demonstrate strategic restraint and incentives for states to cooperate, reducing the cost of international order. And the optimism in the system is justified. Treaties did improve war power and social balances are declining. Horgan 11-9. In the wake of Trump, we need to remember how far we've come. New progressives who doubt progress, but the system can be self-fulfilling if it foments rapidly progress. And also face the face of enormous progress. Humanity is wealthier, more peaceful than more free than ever. Global life expectancy more than double maternal, and child mortality have plummeted globally. And so, right factor everyone more than this is not a zero-sum trade. Extreme poverty has dropped to less than 20%. War caches have followed by 2 wars of magnitude threat of nuclear war has receded since the Cold War. The murder rate has dropped to 50%. Figure documented violence at all scales from child abuse to war has declined 2/3 of the global population lives under a partly democratic regime. There has been tremendous advances in civil rights. When I was a kid, these houses still segregated homosexuality, and so abortion. Trump embodies the paradox of democracy, but American democracy, and through resilient we have survived terrible presidents like a next to Bush, we will survive Trump too, and the alternative is authoritarian feeling by Russia and China, which can the worst freedom and oppression worldwide. Young 14. And American retreat from active global role will be bad for the world and freedom. The power of war, the vacuum, the U.S. scale back to presidents, others will fill the gap. Russia has seen great power status under an authoritarian ideology. Do you confuse that Russia is central in the struggle against the Western hegemony with principles of democracy, human rights, and individualism? Elsewhere, there is radical Islamism vying for control of the brutal tyranny series. China, by economic success, and political dictatorship, and rule in the dominant world, and not be freedom for land. Even if hegemony is impossible, American military engagement is key to prevent global chaos and annexation. There is no alternative. Brzezinski 12. China eventually concluded America's decline around the chance for war, but please let America not decline too quickly. And we're trying to face an equal conclusive real power with no one is setting uncertainty to the risk of global being a Hobbesian world based on varying authoritarian nationalism. And you couldn't see Europe would be bold several directions. Others may carve out their own regional spirits. None. I think requisite power to consider inheriting America's role. China recognizes the success and different of the evolution toward the gradual redistribution more so to China's absolute could rise and mobilize the power of regional coalition against himself. This struggle could become intense, given nationalist tendencies. Georgia, Taiwan, South Korea, Belarus, Ukraine, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Israel, and the Middle East are closely tied to when the American power will undermine the economic and political systems more nationalistic, defensive, and national identity paranoid about security. Let's pull into attack by reasons of violence and worsening relationship between a declining American and internally control Mexico to rise to territorial clans, corrosion of the cooperative management of sea lanes, space, cyberspace, space, and the environment, the strategic complexity of the world. The purpose to make supremacy unattainable, but those dreaming of America's class would regret it as apparent in the U.S. pursue a new strategic vision, and transition would be violent, regional balancing, as this global college on 11. Without American security, regional powers could rerun an attempt to balance against birds. If in this scenario, there would be a high possibility of armed races and miscalculation of other crises firing into all-out conflict, weaker power. They shift their geopolitical posture away from the U.S. They otherwise hostile state to be emboldened to make aggressive moves in the region of rival powers by the Asians, particularly like the emergence of the zone of great power competition. But Beijing's economic crisis enabled a dramatic military build of the United States. The most significant barrier to China's German aggression in war is the cause of injustice, not the effect. Goldstein 1. A deeper understanding of war, multidisciplinary and multilateral engagement of peaceful activists who face a build and thinking about cause of war. The approach rests on the assumption that the injustice cause of war cause everyone, at least as strongly the opposite way. War is not a cause of any single cause, rather, war has fueled to sustain these injustices. The emphasis on justice is the main cause of war seems to be empirical and inadequate. Unipolarity, self-confidence, sustains global interdependence. Appears to go overwhelmingly affirmative. Barnett 11. As the guardian of globalization, you have been the greatest force of peace the world has ever known. Here in America, been removed. There will be no human civilization unless America will change everything by ushering in perpetual good power peace. We introduce globalization resulted with democracy, human rights, liberation, women, the doubling of love, defense, and sustainable increase in GDP in a profound Russian economy. The 20th century slide death toll about 100 million. These calculations say 99% relative drop in death due to war. We are headed for multipolarity, but we do well to keep U.S. power. You should not risk changes in the economic order. Poverty is the lowest it's ever been. It will continue to decline. Pessimism only risk reversing it. Christoph 922. All evidence suggests that we are in a functional point for the number of extreme poverty is doubled by half in 2 decades. The number of small children dying can drop by a simple proportion. 80% alerted it, and then shared by the inequalities on the time because of the gains of the poor. In places like China and India, the public is the opposite. Only 1% whereas the global extreme poverty had fallen. It is important to acknowledge global progress. Otherwise, the public may perceive poverty as hopeless and see no point to the just what we're making them the rapid gains ever recorded less. I acknowledge the greatest gains in the well-being of human species. Institute now accelerate the most important shift in the world today, and we can accurately predict our patterns. Walt 5. Politics is the able to do the fact about second decision-making systems and put rules alone. All required the business third consists of technology which classify phenomena based on the sense of the specific trade policy making can rely on empirical laws. That card is marked as empirical laws.
Okay. You ready?
I am.
Okay. What does establishing a drop-in fuel standard do?
So the Dowling evidence and solvency contextualizes this. It says in the status quo there's a renewable fuel standard,
sure.
But the problem is that it artificially crosses corn ethanol.
Okay.
We repealed that and put a new standard in place that privileges drop-in biofuels. The definition of drop-in is a fuel that can be dropped into existing infrastructure, like pipelines, tanks, etc. Ethanol doesn't meet that because it's corrosive, but things like algae would.
Okay, and why are those biofuels key to naval readiness? Or what battles would the Navy not be able to fight in the absence of biofuels?
Well, so it's not just like battles per se, but the ability to have a strong force allows things like cooperative security regimes.
That's interesting. Your Farley evidence, which is the only evidence that talks about what the Navy uses biofuels for, talks about how it was key to jet fuel for F-12 airplanes. What piece of evidence says that those specific flight missions are key to naval readiness?
Two things. First off, that's false. We read a number of other cards in the concept of biofuels, like the fudge evidence, as well as the chambers.
Sorry, that was the evidence I'm talking about. The fudge evidence talks about how it's key to things like jet fuel. What piece of evidence says that those specific flight missions are key to the preservation of naval hegemony?
Yeah, so for example, the card we read above that the internal link says that part of the way the United States Navy sustains the liberal order is not just hard power deterrence, but cooperative engagement, and via things like military exercises.
Why are military okay, so which conflicts would those military exercises prevent that, and where would the conflict start?
Well, pretty globally, there's a number of internal links for why the liberal international order is.
What card says where conflict would erupt?
Across the globe. The Brzezinski card lists like 20 different countries if you wanted like specific names.
What is the scenario for conflict that occurs?
So, I mean, we only have minute 24 left, so I can't cover it all because I read like 5 and 10 impacts. But
why do you tell me where the
Europe being pulled apart,
Chinese
Chinese nationalism rising because they no longer rely on the strategic international order and integration into it.
The absolute Chinese nationalism?
Yep.
How?
Argument that China is not nationalistic in the South Korea because they recognize that they can integrate into the world order and benefit from things like international agreement. That's not going to rule out hegemony because hegemony is a
So liberalism is sort of this integrating force that's able to pacify the rest of these conflicts. My question is, how does the liberal international order choose enemies versus friends? Allies of the order versus
so
enemies.
the Rashian Doyle into the one piece of evidence piece of this, it says it undermines the idea of a zero-sum competition that previously existed in the international sphere because of positive-sum cooperation. Game theory supports this. People have an incentive to sign on to international agreements.
I'm talking about the criteria that the international order uses to determine legitimate enemies of the order versus those that are in its cooperation.
But it doesn't even rely on enemies of the order. It relies on things like strategic incentive for countries to voluntarily bind themselves to international agreements.
So this voluntary incentives. All right.
So your
cards sort of talk about American military engagement is key to prevent global chaos and extinction. I just want to sort of know what is extinction in this context.
In that context,
everybody
on the Earth dies.
Everybody on the Earth dies. Okay, so people die.
That's not the only impact of the aspect.
Okay, all right. Sort of last question talks about how hegemony, sort of liberalism has produced health and for the entirety of humanity. Which portion of humanity has liberalism benefited?
Every portion.
Every.
Card lists like 20 different metrics about what's improving, and so there's minus 0 sub-trend. The fourth country's benefits most.
Sent it out. It's going to be one off. Then the readiness advantage and the solvency. Alrighty, is everybody ready? Alright. Humanism has become the temporary motor of geopower plant changes, product of the human will, survival, the one sees investment in the law, and the belief in renewable energy standards coordinates the parasitic relationship to ecology, producing life and managing conflicts, however, leaving the strive for attack, the modern Anthropos, Hamilton 13. Addiction no longer purely physical, but the way forward where it expresses itself, including carbon dioxide, do not have just a complex decision taken by human minds. Humans invade the domain of the geology, humanity's geological power, integrated perfectly in system but dynamics of where more technological humans should be seen as the power is ejected through the will of the climate system, natural and human makes up. Influence not be extinguished. humans have over one planet world, and human has the unity of the world, and analysis current and seal. World is social, the human world is always remained separate. The human now in years of natural world, biological accounts of humans has become even more indefensible than ever seen because technological progress, civilization, smooth the royal wheel of the planetary system, all solutions, including cost-benefit analysis, global agreements, carbon prices, and the structure of interest group, all the human not slow, the human component of the planetary system, only radical activism, interrupted dominant culture, opens the possibility that the earth may not be fucked by iron, a lot of progress has been percent, but a lot of progress allowed for those who understood. In the future, be political, global energy will work together and more quickly than once and inevitable because of the end of the well, if there be no stability in the empty, we will be born resources, growing climate, reporter lives, cities, and coastal infrastructure, all ones that are so food supplies and non-testable the gains of patent with the effects of climate securities did not spill in conflict, and political order and leadership is premised around nervous anxiety of running with the fine-tooth to legitimize the political impulse for more climate extinctions. Berkeley 16. International relations under the famous account for extinction, there's simply no separate frame of white running extinction, but simply this form of death regarding the extinction of subject within the security discourse practice business use for problem of scientific management by political control. Extinction is not ecological benefits or the short possibility of being economic management, manipulation of the life death processes, but also secure source of energy, bolstering against by political power. Extinction mass extinction can be understood not by ethical terms of technology and ontological rupture, the destruction motor of existing confronting the ethical ability, more ethical concepts, frameworks and inability to address the normative extinction, reducing life form, capital currency, and financial instruments, modernize the understanding of extinction, imposing Western secular worldview of planetary phenomena, where humans are separate from other beings alive before the count and the account for them, clearly defined species, reproducting other life forms to meet breeding, and presenting forms of value. We need to think about more clearly about ethical implication of extinction, the current escalation of extinctions is part of the preventing causes of global warming, habitat destruction, direct killing, and the transportation of species around the earth. It is crucial to realize that extinction is a matter of global ethics. Mass extinction carries an ethical weight, and forcing humans can no longer ignore. And will never shift the need for fossil fuels or productivity is rooted on sexual desire and anthropogenic subjects satiated by the elixir of fossil fuels. This fundamentally tethers the 1 planetary extinction of fossil fuels now will just switch ethanol, then to methane, all while forestalling addition of subjectivity use 715. The makes poorly defined the system insurance and ultimate moral condition the human with the question burden the heart and unforeseen subjects to be unquenchable human beginnings and anything but beyond frames of life which form partial life from the small desk and forms of living kind of combustion we try fossil fuels and race and continued materialization power resurrection and career for geopolitical planet force being including all falls with the exchange of climate between climate fast we solar go so reason believe that presumed subjects wondering solar pack of them to speculating what it means to be human if the unforeseen to us and career condition pretty sure meaning this is love cannot refuse to make a solar shame to make the song so one of the things clear we can also we won't stop we love to feel sucky even in the series of skies and live about black or long to sacrifice or corporal affiliations are already situated by carnivorous to our loving of blood. The black wood of fossil fuel feedback or cellular career production relies on the fossil fuels as a form of blood, solar energy, the twins of human and human relation, plants, smart, political class, and the free smack off removals, but also coals, highly concentrated vestige of life forms. Once the dominating planet think about how we live in the world of that it requires an intent for how fossil fuel intensity and multiply across all spheres life. So much of the things that forbid the petropolitical life, normative, and this claims also possible makes ourselves of God subjects, open intensification, solar fuels, new vision, possibility, and form reproduction in which they contrary dead on dead. The seems our threshold, we must go back to sexual life, we remember the risks of being sexuality, rocks, and deep present time to give an adequate genealogical account of the biblical life of the presenting subject. Managerialism will cause extinction, massive structural violence, and never outcome of sustainability rules, Ruse, Tomlinson 13. There's monster rule hiding over the ocean, the logic of the monster must die, but you must sustainability movement. Other causes purpose give things little less harmers, no harmers, also law, harmers, sustainability, atticus tells us as long as well harmers, cause different also this is really feeling good about small acts doesn't help anyone, but millions of people animals suffering from themselves, choice forces of being shortened in parks, millions of people are in sweatshops, doing species and becoming same day, branding the side of the wealthy, minority run the nation, using electricity for all their services, make zero difference, mining the components, device, solar power, turbines, and everything that connects electricity, get all sustainable off, the grids, electricity, no different, stable economy, controls are stable, the global economy, sustainable economy runs to the structure of natural world, the slow gamers, are ultimately metals that require mining, manufacturing, war, waste, pollution, millions of bloods, millions of tons of litter into the river, and the production causes the NF3, those 17,000 times higher than global warming, conventional carbon dioxide murders are also rage over the right to mine themselves. The factories miss so much pollution, but people living nearby companies that energy efficiently have a heard Jerome paradox. The state of the technological advances do increase efficiency, lead to increased energy consumption, not decrease, but also global economy needs to be brought to all sustainable energy. The lives of the world's river animals, ocean, industrial, technological economy here, this resources, civilization, not sustainable, won't easily, it won't have instantly, but it's not easy starting to say it's just walk away with levels, it's just fall apart, don't walk away, just not helping break down the bridge the structure does, and in the cases of mass extinction event, reject the one I see in favor of ecological helplessness, being an active witness in the world around us, there opens a real possibility of those human futures that flips the script of human domination in which we embrace our fidelity and inevitable decay. This enables the vulnerable ethics outside of heteronormativity frames that toward the future changes the paradigm of management in Austin 16. Death is extinction, not merely the universe, however, with recognition, total loss of recognition, ecological responsibility, the loss of individual solar entire species, world helps us into anything but watch, think about the fact that we do will become a how to begin what we have to seriously think about for humans plus human beings. It's sort of moment in the design of human rights and education, and increasing possible goal point towards the necessity of any more thought becomes after cultural progression, advancing submission of human disciplines, being the first time in which after extinction that we see beings consider ourselves for which side after abstract hopes grounded in detached from evolutionary consciousness, which feeling revolutionary feeling under consideration, not enough, it opens up the base of exodus, going off from together, which the comparative is linked with annihilation eventually they'll get no more likely we play claiming to tie for plant resources, finding new planet colonize. But hope and hopelessness dialectic because of decision that's not that hope is simply hopeless. Hope is complacency, the act of hope, no activity, which we call for politics over here toward means and not ends with awareness, symbols belonging through negativity, hopelessness can become decision by identity and motive being. Or we all die, but because this means that we reach the death, we defining we are already given the moon in the space, the little point in life, and also they're organized, we have obligation to watch the world burn. And we're watching each other's practice, witnessing our own extinction, but witnessing that we have all left toward an ethical relationship, food, extinction, helplessness. The weight of one thing to place them within the weight of the event is to be the field, weight of the exchange on my own shoulders, and I'm angry, and will yet continue by the performance, the offers, the opportunity to regress these ethical arrangements, so we all obligation over ethical witnessing means of action, position of hopelessness, greater challenge, and poses how the Department of Defense should agree, plan for resource wars won't be addressing buying, previous turning off air conditioning, or signaling, deciding the treaty, the greatest challenge of this philosophical one, understanding civilization is already dead, the sooner we from the situation, the sooner we can get to the adaptive with humility, but embracing hopelessness as being sort of activating anger, making sure extinction is all the complete annihilation of life on our planet. And ethical decision making comes first, rhetoric and ideas control, build on the research agenda, drive implementation of plan, debates, reduce restrictions, signifying environmental frame that are structured with verse 15. Fix and save resonating slash number build reduce environments that have saved you what we value in the idea of control, religion, build and actions, planning the very motives that are so called exploiters, the environment rhetoricians, also the environmentalism, where religion will human control the rhetorician, propose an environmental foundation, mark on the logic priests of positions, and George Shirk and environmentalism, their scientific might also be the world rewrite or right there again, but the humans have over 7 pounds of environment is a code that can also be read master control. This understanding will also be anything but fully democratic right now, or agnostic rather than theology, because unless I know the wild knowledge within the environment, we don't see the meanings for disconnect from nature in order to save the failure of knowledge of limits of human agency, and sometimes just the agency well. Case. Readiness. There's no challenger to U.S. naval power for Lean 7. Despite the campaign from Lean 7, orders of actually more powerful than the rival common system must be worse than no actual evidence the U.S. naval decline exists. Captain's words without modification, distortion, and intent. Historical analogies where there's no comparison between the U.S. Navy and Navy, which the Navy operates 11 aircraft carriers, place capable in large carrier 3 times the aircraft of large carrier. The Russian Navy, like China's only aircraft carrier, American carriers also have the U.S. was dominance and service of vehicles and submarines, submarines, and naval power is good for nothing to be Navy. Navy before involved in the third grade enemies, the U.S. naval powers are obviously they're more slowly, and also because they detected the ancient missiles can travel speeds up to 2,000 miles per hour, and one mechanical device and plunge time being served to be high from the environment, they not set themselves against the market enemy, and there's no risk of declining, no challenges to Gemini, Kaplan, 11. Americans recover a huge word from the U.S. Marines, highly capable of reckoning against any minor events, device of vampires abroad, far more biblical blunders from absolute unpredictable to the point the U.S. can also be the first mandate to continue alliance network in Russia, China will also be inherently trustful in China, will live in the form of internal disruption, naval planners, also American allies, structure, legal, popular reading, influence, naval abroad.
Solvency.
Yeah. Solvency? The Trump administration gusts the affirmative Chomsky and polychronomy for 16. The most important news in November, it was barely noted the past 1 year to the hottest record accelerating warming, the outcome placed in the world control of government and the Republican Party, which is becoming the most dangerous and history of public. The party is also dedicating racing and destructing human life, and every candidate night day was happening, it's happening, and we don't have to do it because we're reducing natural gas, fracking, and winning candidate calls, rapidly increasing the use of fossil fuel, dismantling regulation and reducing helping the developing country and racing to live as fast as possible. Trump started taking steps to dismantle the EPA, placing in charge of the EPA climate change in area, which might enable tax cuts for the industry, more fossil fuel production, living Dakota has been shared than every corporation boom. And after Trump's victory, there's little hope Paris naturally to fair tribal trade, which the thoughts are abandoned when humans are facing the most overproduction in the history, and the answering celebrated by face disaster.
Skip that card and read Marlowe.
Expanding biofuel industry causes unintended consequences. This cascades directs the environment below 09. The addition of significant biofuels also created direction for environment throughout the use of land. The U.S. mandated significant use of biofuels. Such policies account for the unintended consequences of the trading system that increase carbon stock, vegetation, displays of poorly designed politics, undermining the goal of stabilizing carbon dioxide and converting land biosphere hotspots with loss of biodiversity comes cascading consequences. This time, right? Yeah, you get it.
Ready for cross-examination?
Yep.
Alright, let's start with this last card you read. It says, current biofuels like ethanol are trading off with land to destroying the environment. Given that the act restricts ethanol, why isn't this just a link in the RMDA?
Well, I mean,
yeah,
fuel standards.
Current fuel standards that prop up land-intensive biofuels like ethanol, right?
Yeah, I mean, sure, we could read, I guess, more evidence in the blog on this question, but things like the environmental Kuznets curve would say that as efficiency standards increase,
like,
it actually means that consumption
like algae
increases
trading
overall.
off with livestock production seems like an argument doesn't make a whole lot of sense in this context.
I mean, it's most. Wait, I'm confused. So,
that's fine. The critique. What's the proper ethical orientation towards, say, deforestation, CO2 emissions, etc.? The effects of isolated.
I mean, our evidence is very clearly like there is a dichotomy between the human and non-human world. We would say ethically we should reject those things.
So we should ethically reject the dichotomy between the human and non-human world.
That's sort of
what does that mean?
frame that authorizes humanity to control those natural
okay,
processes.
so we know
make arguments about why that sort of fundamental anxiety comes from a separation separation between.
I get your
ability to
criticism of
see
the app.
human
I'm
as
asking
non-natural.
what you believe the alternative to be. So we have to ethically value the non-human world.
The Haas evidence talks about why sort of affirming the dystopian imaginary of a hopelessness enables us to rupture that ethos that humanity can control the conditions of climate change or the sort of natural violences that are occurring as a result of the myth of human
Okay,
supremacy.
but how does that
We
resolve
argue
something
that
like deforestation?
affirming that frame, right, opens up the ability to have a sort of vulnerable ethics that we think might be able to have a better approach to those systems of management, including
Okay.
warfare, the control of
And then,
population
so specifically,
species.
a vulnerable ethics
Yes.
that requires placing more value on nature as such and not humanity.
That is not necessarily the case. It's
How do you
sort of
reject
one
human
that is
animal
open to the possibility of chaos to sort of interrupt human notions of control. Our argument is not that we should let things just get destroyed, but rather that affirming that
But
moment of dystopia
in terms
is a
of
rupture within
yeah,
the
I get that you affirm chaos, but in respect to the links about dualism and such, do you affirm that chaos is good because it benefits humans? Or
What do you know?
you just read a number of links that
That
says the
is
app is
sort
bad,
of-
it separates humans from nature. I'm asking if the alternative rejects that dichotomy.
We
Yeah.
think that the myth of human supremacy is one that is bad, yes,
I
except for
think
the
the
fact that
Rivers
there's a-
evidence is really good on that question about how these sort of debates continually about climate policy
Okay,
makes
so
us that we no longer
Why-
ask questions about
why
how
do
we
things
place
like
this
animals or
in.
nature matter then?
Sorry?
Ethically?
Why do they
Ethically,
matter?
Yeah, why animals, nature, etc.
Well, why do you think you matter? Like, why do we matter? We've not made any statements about
I'm asking
why
you all.
there's any sort of
You
value
asserted we need
that
an
is-
ethical orientation. What's your ethical orientation towards nature, animals, etc.? Why do they matter?
insofar as that it is all things in there that there are vulnerable species that exist with us are valuable in and of
The
themselves.
rhetoric
It's not
you
sort of
use is
that-
interesting. You keep asking
Yeah.
us questions about values and mattering, but we're
Yeah,
like,
you
none
read
of
an
that
ethics
shit
course.
matters. None of it is relevant. None of
You
those
read an ethics
things
though, dude. I'm just asking.
openness to the
about
possibility.
helplessness
Alright,
and hopelessness and
One
opening
last
ourselves
question
up
to your
to
Tomlinson
death.
evidence has no polls and running for deep green resistance to NewYork.org. Why are you qualified to evaluate the environmental impacts
Fuck
of
Citing
that?
OECD studies, development studies about the way that sort of managerial frames have accelerated modern zones of crisis and the way that people are employed into
I don't
sweatshops,
see any more
destroying
about that actually,
landscapes.
but OECD studies.
That's true. controlling impact and hegemony controls global confidence, solution for net evidence, and solution says numerous physical evidence, like questioning, complex escalate and kill millions of people. Also, they consider the a piece of Christoph and Horgan evidence says that hegemony specifically reduces structural bonds, which explicitly answers all of their structural bonds comes on the critique. Also proves the impact term because hegemony is key to continuing trends of decreasing structural bonds and increasing standards of living. The all their impact even says way too old. I should frankly look at the debate because we have new like McGrath evidence. It says the Russian challenges are coming now, like Russia and China. Also, the Brzezinski evidence says that U.S. decline means that people lose faith in the order, which means they lose their incentives to cooperate, which means that even if they're coming with the Russian challenger are coming now, the decline of U.S. hegemony means that challenger will rise in the future, which means another defensive response of the argument about naval war and also doesn't seem deterrent. The McGrath evidence fantastic on the question specifically how Russia and China perceive U.S. naval deterrence. Also, the Farley evidence says that U.S. naval development facilities multilateral cooperation, which is internal link that solves conflicts. That's the Farley evidence. Yes, decline that is in Russian challenges and emerging domains. Brzezinski evidence specifically says that emerging domains like sea space and cyberspace make hegemony uniquely vulnerable, which we need to bolster Germany now in order to prevent people from becoming dissuaded from the global order solvency debate.
They dropped the independent research internal like this completely separate.
They also drop the independent research internally. The Robert Palmage evidence says that the U.S. military interventions in the Middle East over things like oil cause military overstretch, which undermines the U.S. hegemony and credibility, which an independent internal link didn't answer the solvency debate. Firstly, the Trump kills argument doesn't make any sense. One, we get a durable fiat. Anything else could be question should or would undermine topic education. Second, their argument is it says that Trump doesn't believe in global warming. The one I see doesn't take a position on global warming, and he obviously loves boosting the military, which means to keep the planet authoritarian and Trump will keep the RFS agribles. 1117 Renewable Fuel Association and Carbon to the President like Donald Trump will support the renewable fuels and Trump will support the renewable fuels and the last campaign consistently president patrol by this policy. The next segment was called the current or FS wet, and I think Jake was pretty clear on that across six, but also I'll read a card here. Algae reduces land water usage, also results in bioremediation, fertilizer runoff, DOE 14. Algae can be growing on air below not potable water, reducing both energy exchange and water resource purpose addition benefits, including utilization, carbon dioxide, reducing carbon single leading to relative reduction in CO2 emission, potential for utilization, water resource streams, leading to water remediation, reducing fertilizer, pollution, while some things avoid utilization, limited clean water. The critique framework, the debate should center on consequences of plan implementation. One, predictability. The plan focusing only predictable stages for the debate. That's key to effective deliberation and advocacy. Also, fairness. Any other framework boosts the winning scheme. Rex background. Fairness is an intrinsic good key to the value of debate and education. Only our interpretation tells multidisciplinary education is key to confront authoritarianism and Roth 114. This is a fractional time for liberal education, make a commitment to all the margin of the American policy and forgotten how important universities are attention to cultural innovation, social mobility. The academics don't get second status by accident. They're incentivized for birthday because they become so accustomed to self-discipline. In other words, they have trouble in anyone else's atmosphere. Academics seem to Korean language and culture that is what we need to create is intellectual cross-training and education sharing sensibilities and translate across ideas and assumption. We need more academics who facilitate conversation, creative sciences, humanities, discipline, nationals, we're getting culture on the world thanks to peer-based politics, orchestration, broadcast, antithetical liberal learning without open-mindedness. The encourages the path of violence, scapegoating, and especially urgent to advocate federally for broadly based liberal pragmatic education operated by internet authoritarians who rejecting career paper. We have fear market prejudice education should be intellectual diversity in ways that students are trying to grapple with the ideas they would never consider on their own. The way to prevent more effective corruption and liberal education, we need to create individuality and community and partly individuals to create creative voice and encourage the all practical ideals and the become more adept at any kind of intellectual and cultural translation that even the stress by making those reporters and growth is an unsustainable text solves physical the middle of the new ground of food production and development vertical work could be the entire human race 90% less water this because all humanity's water from the world's most savage used to be prepared by a consequent abandonment of farmland. The smart materials already commercialized the transforming wasting electricity and LED lighting emission by 50%. New electrical production method that could be 600 kilograms of carbon nanometers per day. Carbon nanometers should be more suitable in silicon for reducing vulnerable take energy. The algae biofuels use this land require only sun and CO2 plenty for 12% of the world's as well as the annual CO2 output of 1,000 coal plants and radical transformation movements and again fail get cast down as Simon 11 supposed to be for sake of reform and radical transformation. Any strategy for producing change needed much to be desired. Microprocessing meant more deeply about crisis suppose it's a mistake. These infrastructures will colossal studies should be a coherent like ways of living rather than merely intellectual arguments or obvious structures or some not dismantle the class to produce a more humane system. The strategies have the limits of at least take a real proposal that might actually be implemented. Self-sufficient was the writing is such program there's a vague about what self-has for virtual wikis system. The workers often a practical programs they appear unreasonable and utopian. There's no mindset shift global 428 they had the deviation from the normal way of taking a lot of political will change these to reduce to utility maximization. The goals of service by increasing consumption markets which everything advice or reducing supply and demand. The most efficient the myth of economic growth became shield against the actual limits of growth of words to go under the hegemonic regime and community transition to possible Wilson 14. Globalization means that communities are better economic and willing to influence individual decision laws as defined by nation state level. Even though most communities are characterized by dependency, even if communities which disengage increasingly difficulty, capitalism permeates all aspects of modern life and influences decision making geographical levels. The relocalization movements and nation success members are embedded in the global capital system through dependency of economic exchange of global customers in the absence of a alternative global economic model. The corridor of what they spread of global capitalism is likely to continue, and genocide, dissent, American military prosecutors stop masculine, the alternative cause of violence, and need 16 the president's company military action against the regime, the deep exchange and abilities to change of actually the ground, less military in America's land, little to snipper, anti-Americans are drastic drawn on U.S. military personnel does not seem to have brought America much goodwill. The non-observant position to be skeptical of any escalation against society is something else entirely. Plus, skepticism of the U.S. not to others, not to be met the better, more just world instantly possible that the use of American military versus no way to stop violence and slaughter, genocide in Bosnia, Herzegovina without U.S. military force or more stable, which have discovered the onto the identities of ISIS. No one was going to seriously put eyes to the U.S. leadership, even others have been the results are often destructive of the British allies and adversaries do not share its values and the work evidence here is that the attack is only global warrants in the context of confronting environmental destruction, which obviously the app doesn't do, which means you doesn't apply the app, so it doesn't take out solvency. The argument about not shifting basically contributes to your policy failure argument, but it's not in the context of the app doesn't assume algae biofluids, which are a unique form of energy production, which is able to resolve all the problems. No risk of endless warfare. The plan's key gray. So the enhancement part of the information being policy of endless warfare. The American system was designed for the purpose of training the executive Vietnam and Iraq wars that discipline public attitude. The plan the policy, which includes the preventive option by leadership controls, years not convincing it should be dismissed for what is a debating point of the permutation due to the plan, and the alternative in every other instance, either the alternative overcomes or destroys the plan or it fails, and destroying natural environments is good, prevents animal suffering. That's a D-rule Siller out of 16. Consequently, vegetarians believe the farming animals will have lives so bad they're not worth living to lives. Consistently suffering wild animals dominate their concerns and lead them to reduce their number of wild animals. Habitat destruction, nature to remain such, but extreme suffering like starvation, dehydration, being eaten alive are much more common in wild environmental disease. Produce excruciating symptoms such as blindness, hyperthermia, convulsions. But one reason is that on average pleasure is outweighed by suffering. Is that most species are reproductive our selection, which means the overwhelming majority of offspring are eaten shortly after birth. Using studies of animal density, there are at least 600 billion land mammals and 60 trillion fish. That vegetarians are focused on preventing the existence of as many wild animals as possible. A small reduction would outweigh all livestock production. For example, they could reduce animal population by destroying highly dense animal habitats such as rainforests and yeah.
Okay, let's see.
Allowing preventable human death is ethically wrong by Patterson. Through determining whether life is worth living, it should be focused on a array of interest in different patients. That's the prerogative of the patient. The person values his or her own life. That life is valuable precisely to the extent that he or she values it. It falls to the primary injustice of a person is to deprive the person of life he or she may think is valuable for his family life goals, etc. And it has to self-assessment for the determination of meaningful life. And what about the?
You can read that one if you want.
Okay. Death ends our ability to actively seek our joy and suffering, symbolic encounters via the communicated realm of debates.
Actually,
never mind. Skip that card. The Vagrants are voted, they undermine clash and moody kind of critical education. Also, justifies new answers to the 1AR when they shift into 2 and C. And also the counterpoint is the critique is in the logical opportunity cost because it doesn't use the deliberative of the 1AC, which means that you reject it. Also means that permutation to both is logically consistent because you can both endorse the enactment of renewable fuel standard and whatever the alternative does on an individual level because there's no mutually exclusive trade-off. Alright. Contemplating death is key to vital life. Counseling. 99 fear of death is fear so that we can do something about the sense of danger, courage, and prayer for a peaceful death and put the seatbelt on. Out of a sense of danger, the seatbelt protects we can seize control over how we prepare for death and how we act contemplating our own death. Well, as far as the use of life wisely of fear and discussion of death are different. Contemplating financial exposes the purpose of life. Ground 82 deaths by no means pleasant. These medical deaths given rise to deep thoughts they did not to be repressed. These unfold the potential to receive truth. The death unlocks the mystery of life by understanding the death we understand. Life, the contemplation, death, the edge of vanity, the mindfulness, the effect of robbing death with tears and terrors, the contemplation ultimately the reality is inclination to death or due to weakness. We must have a face facts we can take the steps necessary for our betterment. Alright. Also, in case this becomes the truancy floating picks or a voter, they undermine ground, which key to fairness also justifies permutation to the alternative because the critique's not meaningfully competitive, doesn't do anything, function differently. Alright, cross-check.
Alright, so just to start, voting issues are vague alternatives and voting votes.
Yeah.
Okay. So, the cover that you read about Hegemony's central to solve mass killings is specifically about Syria. Did the U.S. intervene in Syria?
The Hamid evidence doesn't say that the U.S. is currently intervening in Syria. It just says that U.S. military power is a desirable.
Okay, so let's talk about the Yemen raid that happened a few days ago that left at least 30 civilians killed. Is that an example of the United States, I guess, fighting ISIS or Al Qaeda? That's all part of this consequentialism thing where it's for the greater good. Like, I'm confused. Like, what is the standard for when intervention is good and necessary?
So the Hamid evidence specifically like talks about the situation in Syria and says that like despite
So why didn't we intervene if there was like massive killing going on as a result of a bloody civil war?
Well, the Hamid evidence specifically says that like things like the critique are what disincentivize interventions because like leftist politics discourages.
Leftist politics just discourages all military interventions. So I guess what is open-minded then, referencing your Roth evidence, that's just like, oh, we can have multidisciplinary education. What is open-minded about advocating for United States hegemony? You seem to not even be able to defend the military in isolated instances where it's been like provenly violent.
I'm confused. The Hamid evidence says that the military.
I'm talking about the Roth evidence now. I want to know what is open-minded about your pedagogical approach by saying like ethanol, algae, or whatever, and then
example here. So the Hamid evidence says that there are some versions of military intervention which are violent, and we should understand that those instances are violent, but that we should also understand that there is a value to U.S. military interventions, and that there are instances in which that's the case. That's much more open-minded than the position like the critique takes, which is sort of a more totalizing.
Okay, so I guess I'm confused then, because you didn't give us really any specific examples and want to see cross-sects about where this violence is happening, just like, oh, all these different people are going to contend for power.
So I saw talks about emerging domains like sea space and cyberspace.
Yeah, that card is also from 2012. Like, Bannon said that we will go to war over the South China Sea. How does that play into this?
I'm confused. Why do you think that's...
If Bannon is saying that we are going to start wars with places like China, then why does that not mean that A, your impacts are inevitable, or that the hegemony is already declining to the point in which interventions are going to happen?
That particular context was like Bannon just like speculating about potential conflict scenarios, but in any case, the Barnett evidence says that as long as the U.S. is able to like maintain military superiority, it'll deter conflict. I guess I'm confused about why you think that there's like a logical connection.
So I get it. That evidence is from 2012, I believe. What advances have been made in the last 5 years that are a direct threat to U.S. hegemony? I want to know your warrant is for decline coming down.
Fossil fuel dependence.
That's it.
In the Navy. The Robner and Talmadge evidence says that like sustaining U.S. Military interventions over oil undermine U.S. credibility and overshows the military. Yeah.
I use this chair.
Right.
I mean, I think probably use the trash can.
I use the trash can. I would just
Do you flip it upside down?
No, I just did it like that. I don't know. My laptop's like a little wide, so.
Just put it in the trash can.
I think it might go straight into the trash.
There might be. I think there might be like a recycling bin over there that might be thinner.
Hey, you're right. There's nothing in it.
Vicent, Doc.
Yeah, borrow one of your timers.
Yeah.
That'd be okay with you. Alright.
Wait, let me pull my.
Okay. Okay. Anyway.
Hold on, pause.
Yeah, you're good, you're good.
Alright, ready.
Okay. Everyone good? Welcome to the age of the androids, the human-induced cycles of climate change, massive species loss, and the acceleration of the global patterns of development, the outcome of a modern phenomenon in which nature is no longer separate from humanity, but is the expression of a human calculative will to order and stimulate the climate calculate for constant reproduction of species. This biologistic account reduces life to a parasitic relationship to ecology while creating an anthropocentric framework for policy. This turns on one of two ways. A step one is that evil readiness and anxiety of conflict are rooted in a will to mastery concerning a future perpetuation of the species that authorizes the subjugation of categories of life for the sake of this authorizing frameworks and categories of permissible life and cause extinction, diversity, warfare, and conflict. SAM for a deepening of this nature cultural dualism that creates permissible categories of violence and accelerates war, waste, pollution, deforestation. Millions of sweatshop facilities around the global periphery of the products of the managerial will toward the Thomas evidence was dropped indicates that this fast acting subsumes readiness, ongoing destruction of the periphery causes extinction. Managerialism makes any of the work impact calculus a nullified frame because the question of this debate between the orientation we have towards one in which constant equal readiness is preserved versus the sort of object framing of human supremacy that makes all of those extinction neverland. And human extinction is not more valuable than the rest of natural world. This glory 12 life is the right interaction between energy, radial energy with carbon, mental, spiritual, tangible energy, appears to the physical. These produces life transformation process to continue to the subatomic level particles, execute purposeful movement, readily giving an we choose like started process that have nothing in common with a human. They have joined the star struggles and defeats like we do transformation involves the environment and individually exchanging energy and matter rather than the transformation matter themselves. The scientists have shown electrical impulses that indicate a joy pain within animal and plants on another framework debate. The 20 should be held to the epistemological merits of their approach to ecological management. Ace one of the balance of choice between management frames, play and focus reduces debate and consequence of which choice education would justify carbon allowance, carbon tax half with being grouped in the same category without ever evaluating the nuances between the approaches to management themselves. For which fails to educate us on the nuances of things like reactive, proactive, and visionary management. The point is that it's fair because it's reciprocal. The negative is held to the assumptions of the alternative for the entire debate. Representation must be the stable locus for this debate and a restriction topic. Otherwise, they moot 9 minutes and one is the climate change is inequitably distributed, which disproves all the theses of your fairness claims, which provides uniqueness for our interpretation. The aft choice also solves your interpretation. You should be held to the assumptions of what it means to defend that particular style of U.S. federal government policy. Desirability implies a focus on value statements, which solves all other offenses infinitely more predictable than their strategy. You've conceded the reverse evidence, which is frame how you look at the framework. They don't get to weigh the ontological understandings of prerequisites to post focus because condition the possibility of all knowledge claims and underlie the role of communicative research. No publications or way out of length. Once he engages in that sort of fix and save communicative strategy that tries to recode what the affirmative means in every single debate, which is the meant to fulfill a sort of skills maximization regime that turns knowledge into a form of standing reserve in which we can control and discipline subjects. Only reauthorize the same form of ethical violence that puts subject to the bottom, non-subject to the bottom of his calculative hierarchy. And here, ethic solves yes, ethical frames come first in a debate. The alternative enables a better vision of the affirmative problem that's Reynolds attend the alternative approach to calculation, justification, market, and policies to open up the discussion of climate ethics.
is focused upon international illusion marks that there's an ethical step of the environment can be rational managed in search of an armor to degree Celsius to qualitative goals to avoid dangerous climate change. Whatever that means, not implied discussion and moreover calculation will produce empowering attachment to like the question for climate economics should be maximize utility for another. How we want to live, there needs to be politics of what areas of choice, alters practice and engagement, enable the aura of mastery. We need to develop an ethic care in relation to climate change with the possibility of suppressing institutional barriers or leaking care with what might exist brings down to the focus of the continuity of the good life and the ways in which climate policy interact with or generate the good, the positive political tools. Climate policy fail to answer fundamental questions such as what kind of nature we wish to inhabit, what kind of nature we wish to preserve or make it, or if need be to wipe off the surface of the planet. Politics is constrained within these choices. Extend the alternative here. The affirmation of a human hopelessness is how beings operate in a world of ecological hopelessness, not a denial of death, which creates an ethical impulse to frame the climate crisis in an anthropocentric framing that reproduces calculative ordering in the form of deterrence or naval hegemony. Only this hopelessness to prevent cease extinction of Russian world decay around us rejects this abstract utopianism in favor of a final moment of revolutionary compassion, with which we can imagine humans as going off the script and forces us to confront the ethical priorities that shape the implementation of planet Sol's affirmative into his ace point. It makes the possibility of rethinking categories of ontological violence possible by directly identifying with ways that those are interpreted into a calculative grid that is based upon anthropocentric human supremacy. Piece of one is that it's the ultimate affirmation of ethics that allows us to see the way that movements of life are created within a possibility of hierarchical relation. The alternative itself engages and disrupts that ability of a dystopian dream in which humans can control the chaos of things like the international order without ever attuning ourselves to the more vulnerable means of living, which solves the entirety of their affirmative, but they have no way to answer that. And also, even if radical care doesn't necessarily solve the ethos of the alternative, is necessary to solve the after 2015 that insufficient counting enough facts that the devil that is love. It's too late. We should be just enjoy what can be done without projecting any decent future. This combination of nihilism and hedonism seems exposed and understanding the ethos of man reveals that it is such a view fails to be attached to the goal. We must reflect on what it means allowing yourself to enter days of desolation and hopelessness and grief. Climate disruption will require that we change how we conceive ourselves to learn the gap between habits and supposition of despair can be an important act of embracing the eventually silent relation when we start reworking ourselves. We must be willing to endure negativity and activation, disintegration, ethos is the common ethos to an eventful world purposes to accept and respond to change the level world that contains loss and ethos that is slow shape to endure death and loss and accept new circumstances and the experimentation of the goals to change the very way we see the world. We see and understand what we climate crisis recognize the powerful spectrum with themselves and their children. They will impose their own solution of the rest of us. They will protect and exacerbate unequal actions. The means of survival. We must democratize survivability. We cannot rely on the system to respond democratic or even to treat us just as fairly and market and fairly. Now I'll do the first three link arguments. First is the humanism link. They did not answer the Hamilton evidence indicates that humanity is a geological power that knows no limit. The invasion of geoscience with the modern anthropos marks the inability to measure human patterns of climate change impossible and reflects an ontological understanding that eradicates things like the land, sea, air, and sky. This turns out purely objective nature of scientists and quantification. The domination of the cosmos is inextricably linked to the propagation of human systems and the liberal international order that allows nature to become commodified. This unalterable belief and progress also internally turns all of their ability to access these depth arguments because it makes it impossible to see as the way that categories of life are submitted under the absolute destructive environment in the favor of creating productivity. The second link argument was the Burke evidence indicates that death virus is an impossible formulation for when you see the attempt to legislate away sort of crisis through things the biopolitical control of the Navy is exactly a humanist attempt to securitize that is propagated on a will discover this very form of survival is one that is rooted in an inability to confront the notion of a death of a human subject. It furthers the death of species and inevitably rearticulates itself in the violence against the periphery. The last link argument was the use of evidence indicates the one to see will not cause a shift to newer forms of consumption, but rather reframes the way that we consume things. The one to see's framing of life as an inherent anxiety with the concerns of small death is an expression of his sexual panic that is rooted in that same denial of finitude, need to weaponize for the sake of war, an obsession with productivity that only takes for granted the future of humanity makes, and internally turns the ideology of their affirmative would be to propagate the human race at any expense to the cosmos, causes things like destruction of the environment as well as makes naval hegemony impossible because we will inevitably destroy those things that fear us. Only the alternative sort of hopelessness solves these link arguments because it enables an ethical sort of a direct identification with our inability to manage crisis. It does not necessarily mean that we should never solve instances of violence, but the prior question to unlock an agency capable to think those things is to first consider the way that those forms of categories of violence are bracketed up by myths of human supremacy. Now, there are arguments about education. One, we've impacted this is the humanist form of education that only reifies the human subject and doesn't come to terms with the way that those categories of ontological violence are predetermined by a relationship to space. Their growth argument doesn't answer the critique. It's a question of the frames that you've implemented into the debate. You should be forced to defend them. We said that those are based on managerial institutions. Their argument about radical transition are impossible. One, hopelessness provides uniqueness to this. It enables us to question the way that our patterns of living and thinking are insufficient to deal with the current necessities of climate crisis, but only the alternative creates a bottom-up way to rethink about the 1EC, which means that if anything, you can think about it as a pick out of the 1EC's frames, even if it doesn't necessarily necessarily solve the entirety of the affirmative. Their argument about transition wars are impossible. One is that wars are already happening now. There's no way that the act would cause a transition. Either that naval readiness means that it's just a question of the frames you've introduced to the their genocide argument. Is you should be skeptical of that. You can see that Mac will do more of that argument in the 1 and R. Also, they made arguments about how destroying animals is uniquely bad. One is that is an impossible frame within the category of the one that sees anthropocentric ethics, because it's one that sees that the perpetuation of human species at the qualification of life is inevitable. Means that there's no way for the affirmative to ever solve that. All their arguments about big laws are not offense for us, because we've said reject the affirmative frame means that you have to just justify why those things are good in the first place before you can get into your big arguments. So even if they say that pigs are bad or valuing pigs are bad, one is that pigs are good because they enable to test the efficacy of the one sees representational phrase. B sub one is that's reciprocal because you held us to the text of alternative. We should be able to pick at a certain portion of the one sees rhetorical framing. C, it's best for going to justify the ideological justifications that are key for climate change, especially when they're in the context of ethics, which means that there's no offense for them. You should have just read representations defense.
Okay, sorry. Yeah. You to go? Yeah. Alright. So, first question. The humanism link is like, we value humans over animals. I guess
more than that. It's that humanism has reshaped the way we should think about climate ethics. That the debate we should be having is about the notions of human supremacy that inform our climate change policies, not the effects.
I'm confused about the logical connection between we value humans over everything else, and we then kill humans.
Okay, one is that those notions of supremacy give way to categories of permissible violence, i.e. those like China, India, etc.
What substantiates this? And like, what's the logical connection between the two? Like, what's the like cognitive process?
So
I value humans over everything else, therefore I'm going to kill them.
So our Burke evidence substantiates this about how international relations' inability to deal with the sort of death of human subjectivity correlates to an increased securitized response to prevent things like climate catastrophes or against naval readiness. Our arguments are that this anxiety promotes sort of gut reactions in which we try to reframe the outside of liberal international order to capitulate to a notion that would preserve human existence.
So you're making a separate argument about securitization. I guess I'm confused.
That's one link, yeah.
Yeah, I guess I'm confused about where you think there's a causal internal link between like us valuing humanity over everything else and us like committing genocide.
I mean, yes, there's no like empirical one-to-one, right? But it's sort of the way that those structural identifications create ideological systems that justify them.
Yeah, but you haven't even like articulated even a cognitive process that could explain how this is the case.
Our use of evidence talks about how it is one rooted in sort of a sexual desire or sexual panic, right? One in which we try to see
there's
the
one
future.
piece of evidence that sort of like psychoanalyzes humanism and says like asserts that means that they'll like kill them.
I mean, you didn't read offense against that, so it's like, yeah, we think that the question of the way that humans posit themselves in the Anthropocene is one based upon sexual survivability that perpetuates domination of
the Earth. Is about like finding solutions to climate change to solve like U.S. hegemony.
Which one?
The ethics of care card that you read?
Yeah, our Randall's evidence talks about how that should implicate the frames by which we make policy decisions, right?
Yeah,
it's
so
not
how does that
directly
result in, like solving for algae biofuels, naval readiness, or like Middle East interventions.
Right, perhaps it would be things like a critique of the way the 1AC picks and chooses certain countries that will lash out against one another, framed through these sort of.
How does the alternative result in like algae biofuels that result in naval readiness or?
We didn't say that doing algae biofuels are bad. We picked out of the sort of frames of the 1AC that talk about the notions of the liberal international order as being key to naval readiness, key to this anxious-ridden deterrence.
Yeah, hence my confusion. How does the alternative result in algae biofuels that result in naval readiness and or Middle East interventions?
So we do things like plan minus naval interventions.
Okay, so
tell me why you think that's incompatible.
So the alternative results in algae biofuels and then doesn't use them for military purposes?
We're just giving you examples, right? We think that sort of advantage is premised upon a false notion.
No, I'm just asking what the outlet was. All right, that's fine.
We told you.
We'll take a couple of those. That was just me wanting.
Did I get my time back?
Yeah.
It's just going to be the solvency and then readiness flow.
solvency, then readiness.
Yep. Solvency then readiness. Everybody good?
Yeah.
Yeah, good.
Alright.
Wait, 15.
Oh, I just asked you about that.
Hold on 1 second. Take
Brad?
Yeah.
You want me to read something? Well, I can do that. Just
Yes,
ask me.
yes, yes, yes. That's fine, just leave that.
I'm gonna resend this out in a second. Yes, 740. Okay, we're gonna add the K to the top of that order. I just resent it out. Everybody good?
Yeah. Oh yeah, K for the top.
Yeah. Okay, solvency readiness. Alright.
The permutations are impossible. The purpose of the debate should be to adjudicate competing onto-epistemological strategies for relating to the environment. First is the assimilation disadvantage. The permutation is the telos calculated managerialism that hides the contradiction of violent humanity through the promise of restriction profile, bringing all entities under an intelligible grid of maximized valuation and reproduction. This is incommensurable in all the alternative culture performed witnessing human extinction and re-signifies the terms of a more insidious humanism. Second is the permutations are intrinsic. The alternative is exhaustion of human knowledge systems in favor of epistemic hopelessness. The permutation attempts to include rationalization, making economic calculus, and the alternative which has the anthropocentric utilitarian justification for the conglomeration of human life, which makes the affirmative moving target moving 9 minutes of one. It's the offense creates weak ethical subjects. Not our fault you didn't answer our leak arguments. Third is severance. Severance out of what you see representation global warming. It is an entity managed and controlled. This is God's alternative solvency and makes it impossible to generate criticism of the managerial justification with and essential for the topics for the effective plan is negative state action because they can just read new environmental theories of management in the 2AC and promote critical offense. And 4 is a futurism disadvantage. The solution oriented policy permutation for promises of the future to come yet always out of reasonable save humanity, result of projection of enlightened man into the future, ignoring the destructive criminal tendencies. Cobra 16. If humanity's been the victim of suffered over protection of exploitation, then humanity emerge after the intercede. If we fall down in a world less more than there must be a better humanity come humanity. This means bring self-ingrained non-system must also follow the rally saves us in order to do so against the possibility of attributing blame, retrieving another state of humanity. Humanity is constituted by the threat of disappearance, the violence of the moral law. That reaches man to guilty animal then post through an event of guilt and diagnosis of which an end to others being such a man and account for who is and what in the tragedy occurred. Says emergency call to suspicion of free rating of opinion with the great certainty of authority. We can only hear those who have a future come promise of plus humanity the right is inherent to literacy only actually be assessed on the future for us and climate change is justifying saving humanity only emerging and or if you can save the economy. Solvency. Durable fiat in this debate should be a voting issue. It only naturalizes the Trump administration and it makes it so that we're going to be more able to make so his presidency more palpable. White supremacist ideology should never be endorsed. Durable fiat and topic education needs to be defined in the context of the current administration. What sort of political practices are going to be appropriate in the status quo? This is also a reason why the agricultural evidence does not answer this argument because either one proves the affirmative is not inherent. Trump has already promised to pursue this aspect of his agenda, which means that there's only a risk of them accessing any sort of type of analysis of the internal link, or it supercharges all overlink arguments because the RFSs are always always going to be incentivized or going to incentivize capital benefits. There are evidence specifically talking about how CEOs have been cooperating with Trump in order to get these things on the agenda. Which is also the reason why you can send the Chomsky evidence that 3.3 billion acres of public land are currently being discussed whether or not they should be opened up for fossil fuel extraction. This is an example of why this sort of dependency is always going to be inevitable. The affirmative is not going to be enough to overcome those things, specifically in the context of things like Myron Ebola and Max Tillerson. There are specific conglomerates that are going to have associations with the cabinet that are going to make it impossible for us to ever fully transition away from the fossil fuel dependency, which either means that your internal link is going to be inevitable, or that you deny you, or that you should prioritize the link arguments because we need to prioritize questions of ethics and how we actually relate to these larger climate systems. Readiness. Oliver doesn't answer the first two 1NC cards on this flow. First, to extend the partly evidence that there's no current challengers to Navy power. Russia doesn't have the Air Force or any sort of army support that would make it so that their Navy will ever be threatening to us. China has one aircraft carrier that they bought from the Soviet Union. This is all demonstrative of why their access, no internal link to access, actually being able to provide solutions for great power wars rather than the readiness scenario. That's also the reason why the Reed evidence needs to be floated or needs to be extended, because Navy fleets are obsolete and needs to be improved by the crisis in the Strait of Hormuz last year, where we had a rogue missile that was launched on one of our carriers and we almost started to invade Iran. This is an example of why naval power is not key to achieving your stability for our own 10. There are few places where even electrical environment conflict being centered possible none of the primary maritime character of the sea ways are predominantly for a danger classic reason for white nation will seem naive relatively important in today's world, and they cannot be deployed effectively. Watson 12. The prime period of mobility not technological discovery was actually seen on here communication resource things can be culturally problematic, comprehensive legal reviews often may not take time, and which is the reason crisis during the arrival of vessels delay time of operational impact issues or just bureaucratic reason of the culprit is the legal operation of requiring rapid response. Now, there is no specification over which sort of violences are actually going to have a result as declining hegemony, which means they hold us to a low threshold for winning or legal agreement and any sort of ethics disadvantage to this. Specifically, the focus on direct forms of visible violence and what allows for complacency within the system. World is not getting better. They're supposedly object metrics, only mass violence suffering in the heart of modern society. Evidence around 15. We have time for those who have reason to find some certain objective rational way. They're not neutral pedagogy, different power, ideology, neutrality, analysis, simplicities, downward and rationalization, violence, and would invest in our cultural production as well. Because it provides the normal and necessary price being entertaining, more radical person is more fully he or she understands rather knowing that you should transform it. But all those like being hurt, collaborative, perception, relying upon equivalent capital, human death rates, only exists if the English say the current social order related preventable violence, impoverishment, financial degradation, malnutrition, mass incarceration, violence, psychological violence cannot be reduced to reduction, dispatch, but also proliferation of media output of ours, with us and engineering being sub-political gain, which predatory society and suffering and death becomes a reason to reject rather than mourn, and extreme violence becomes the popular resource for which people actually fund the pleasure coordinates, and claims of increased standard of living are bullshit, even though overall wealth is increasing and is accompanied by inequalities amidst all 17. Statistical evidence that economic equality exists and increasing overall problems and conglomerate with and also associated with increasing inequality in 62 wealthiest people in the world, and the same amount as at least 3.5 billion of them, 3% of the world's population. The wealth of 60 people increased by 44% between 2010 and 2015, while the bottom 3.5 billion people by 41% higher levels of inequality are correlated with a wide variety of undesirable consequences, including lower expecting greater levels of community funding, greater levels of drug use, more mental health problems, more physical education, greater obesity rates, increasing the level of violence, level of education, performing high rates of appreciation, and lower levels of social mobility, working poor, have little chance of actually advancing beyond the current situation. This is also the reason why challenges are going to be inevitable under the Trump administration. Even if the ban thing is just a speculation, there's still going to be other conflicts over Taiwan and other sorts of tensions that are boiling as a result of administration claims. There's also a reason why we should extend the capital evidence. There's no really low risk of hegemonic collapse in no other nature and has relative power capabilities to challenge the United States or its economic or cultural weight, which means the U.S. controls the key lines as trade blocks will keep it afloat. Other nations don't have means or motive in order to challenge the United States, and all of their evidence is empirically about decline or empirically disproven. Drop in 9. African years come between the United States and the 1950s, but even also under the law urgent power in imperial officers previously Washington Patrick Kennedy wrote 1975 through Iraq War, the high school officers turned out to be a form of turned out to be the mild recession.
We've got do you remember how much more?
723.
the advantage, solvency, and then the K.
You said advantage, solvency, decay.
Yeah. And then now I'm good. Okay, anyone not ready? Then I shall begin.
Activity outweighs the ability and responsible common both with deterrence civil international cooperation, difficulties in transition towards the backwards today. Do not grapple with it. Also, social structure classes, increase levels of evidence and evidence is terrible. It says that per capita death rates is a bad study. Obviously, it's necessary. Otherwise, a population would just be in the status quo always looks automatically worse. The opposite evidence says differences in standard of living are across the board different. However, it doesn't cover the quiz of evidence. Both sides of the rich and poor grow, which means there's no absolute impact to even people living in poverty. The head stuff properly. We're not going to the new part. We'll concede it's not giving a Jimmy, which means that other differences apply. However, they dropped it into the independent overstretching release throughout this bit that we are either drawn up from non-essential reasons like the military keto, to say military we are on when we lose head to overstretch now. The job and for the business capitals, the translation is 2 lines long and our data better. Now, the solvency stuff. First thing is drop the weak and gerbil fee anything else. The short topic education confused it shouldn't with the inherent makes it that the reading to the Trump is actively pushing the plan down. Just that he would not roll back because it is not a global warming policy. It's just a emission policy which is existing and not in the context of any other evidence. Really contextual to the one I say
The argument about like
Trump doesn't do the application for the horde which said the Trump is a hiccup that the broader
against the argument that Darwin fiat normalizes Trump /
yeah, there's no we didn't fiat something that's pro-Trump. Our court just said that wouldn't roll it back. Obviously, not every policy is pro-Trump.
Yeah, and then education about climate policies is important, even if the current political climate isn't friendly to climate policies.
Yeah, education about climate policy is important, even if the current political climate isn't friendly. All the imperial the one I see suggest that. The key critique.
Yeah, also means we don't normalize Trump. We just say that things that aren't like in line with Trump.
Yeah, I already said we don't normalize Trump. The critique. Overview at the top of the humanization doesn't matter our past circumstances and says that every time you cause a human person to do this and that denies their freedom of choice to choose whether they want to live or not for themselves, or the denial of the agency on all of instructions of being all independent of the Celtic animals the court below, which says that the contemplation of death and independence keeps back alive allows us to recognize the importance of making decisions for our own well-being, which both they impact our churches as well as prove that the value of framework and consider death impacts which answers the framework and keeps them acceptable proper down the framework properly we can do with anything else for the Western music the one I see destroys class, which is important for us to be there, especially why we don't do just an assertion of ethics, which is obviously not responsible because you can incorporate ethics without denying the value of the plan. Floating makes our ability to steal the entire one, especially with the breaking in the 2 and C and independent just by interpretation do the critique because it includes the entirety of the denial of the human nature duels is not a consistent portion of the one I see that their group their education represents. Those can be incorporated along with all the one I see people waiting to consider critical terms. There's no going to deny the way they have to access any of the education stuff. They care ethics stuff group and they have a nebulous explanation of how it resolves anything in general. Definitely of the cross-dimensions improves. They would not allow us to use technology to support Germany, which doesn't have any portion of the one I see. Climate is bad for all sorts of film. Even if they do succeed, they get replaced by disease and even worse reasons. No empirical solvency that also did not point how to any of their specific impacts just by reorienting care ethics. They are preventing material patterns of consumption policy, which something the alternative cannot overcome. It doesn't include government action. The permutation proper we're not going for permutation of do both the answer links of the humanism that does not constitutionally between human environmental policy is the reason why affirming the human side denies the animal value, and that's not something that any part of the one I see serves the biological control or the impact of all the hedge good arguments, but we one that forceful that war is but the fertile side who means doesn't it with you violence and also and by the great who says that there's no risk of endless warfare because it looks like democracy institutions check it's also actually not the alternative is uncovered Jesus starts the day alternative is bottom that's exactly the side that it says fails because you cannot topple the entire capital system because people are structurally ingrained and you care about things like market logic as well as no personal habits, which means you asserting that you think that capitalism is hopeless design cause a broader change change my they also know like because business capital system growth is sustainable now, which is not answered by any of the 2 pieces of evidence. They've dropped the genocide to measure how many evidence says that you need to recognize the possibility of ethical for an individual, otherwise you allow vulnerable populations places like the Middle East to die. Anything else before we take the picture?
Answer the like predictability stuff on framework.
predictable, some obviously there's no unique predictable opportunity. You can predict you should be able to get to the plan. There's just reason why they get to the equity, also not why you should not. The value of money. See also there is just to the case human body themselves the dollars does not cost communication single amount of human could sorry 99.1% of all species within the same species are so not possible function with even if every order becomes the same, the number of species has been increasingly species becoming into the far exceed the number of becoming extinct. Body makes a little difference. What about plants and agriculture? Over 80,000 animal, only 150 are cultivated now. The last time I'm gonna go for the Siller Adams discount percentage to fucking drop they always just say the impact framing card that we cannot actively the one to see is not and impact framing card they have to impact turn to the K that they had not subsequently entered. It says that every time that you pay Paradise and put up a parking lot, you're doing the primary ethical obligation towards the natural mind because the nature is a constant torture chamber of unending suffering for every natural species because suffering always happens for every single animal species that considered in our selection framing that the nature of animal reproduction means that the vast majority of animals that ever come into existence inevitably die shortly after birth, which means they cannot possibly experience any positive value. Only the suffering and anguish and pain of death because overpopulation would ultimately result in anything else but the case. This is the reason why if you care about nature, when any other impact on regard that humanity is no more important than nature than you vote for because only for the cause of the environmental destruction which is necessary to put animals out of the misery. Here's more evidence. Recently, before brother both mass after death, always every other fact possible for an EFS essay. There's that beauty control that Charles had in less than effort needed an animation for before this reports that birds, fish, and telephone may there will be more warning impressions than mammals and pre-part neurodevelopment in the bird. It's very well advanced in summer before hatching. Thus, it's clear that many animals are able to suffer by birth time before market before. This also independently turns at this kind of prerequisite recognition rate in individual rotation towards animal suffering to possibly animal activists focus on areas of humans directly interact with subjects of active for zoos and they like really discuss the animal suffering in the wild. Even if the academic literature and team suffering is a regular feature of life in the world that demands long-term research into the welfare of wild animals and technology that might allow humans to improve the eye. Encourage animal advocacy to focus on return. And first one, you were concerned about wild animal suffering among academics in the public, both you and encourage research and to ensure that our descendants use tech ways that alleviate animal suffering.
Yeah, drop the impact turn. If you care about animals, then you should vote for it.
Okay, 7-12, I believe, right? 40. 7-40.
The one AR or the one extending?
The one you're extending. So it's
Yeah, it's just animal. It's like animal death good. Animals live life constant suffering.
I got it.
Let's
kill animals. Great. Wonderful. nightmare. Okay.
Take that as good advice.
I'm gonna expose some liberalism here, but that's okay. Just, yeah. Man, it's a sweatshirt. Can I borrow your timer?
New 2AR double turn.
Brody can still win. Alright. Alright, you need an order. Me. Alright, the advantage and then the K. I mean, it seems pretty basic enough. Okay.
Oh, sorry, did I just listen to it?
Perhaps you did. Yes.
There we go. Thank you. Okay, I'm good.
Okay. Ready?
The one era has lost after the debate, especially when they concede that the naval deterrence is not key to hegemony. The question of this debate should be whether or not that in the abstract humanism is able to control contingent conflicts, or whether or not that it creates a panic-ridden anxiety that is only based on anthropocentric justifications for violence. First is no specific conflict because they don't allow neutral air because they don't have been sketching the whole debate. If anything, this form of paranoia perpetuates complacency, and the anthropocentric order that makes their impact scenario the closest they get to an impact scenario is something about Chinese national, but we have turned that prioritization of spectacular violence as naturalized by the anthropocene. B sub 1 is you consider the Evans and Jerome and reads evidence. You don't solve this because A sub 1 is that things like impoverishment, financial predation, and mass incarceration, ecological degradation are all created by the myth of human supremacy, which all become contingent conflicts in a world that is built upon an anthropocentric justification for policy. We specifically indict your author who is citing Pink are all impact conflicts as a matter of ideology cannot be made neutral, focused only on humans. That's per capita sweeps the way the structural violences are adjusted through the periphery and create categories of permissible violence, which makes all of their impact framing of the two-way are new and a product of anthropocentric notions of human exteriority, which will cause unending forms of violence. Even if you don't believe that, go to the critique. They've considered the role of the ballot and what it means to vote affirmative or negative. Nobody should be held to the epistemological justifications of their approach to ecological management. A sub point was that the ballot is a choice between management frames. The E sub point is that plan focus and reduces debate to its consequences, which avoids the nuances of the way that we come to justify those particular things. A sub point is that climate change is inequitably distributed, which is a conceded war, which means that it has to provide uniqueness for our interpretation, for how we think about the way that anthropocentric notions of humanity contribute to that way that is unevenly distributed across planes of violence and justified against the periphery. B sub point is that you consider that aft choice solves your interpretation. You get to choose the aft, and we should be able to hold you to your ideological representations, meaning that you don't get to weigh the aft so long as you prove a dissent to your methodological framing. And desirability means that you have to focus on the value statements implied by the very notion of when the one he calls into being, the notion of a managerial subject that can be able to regulate the international world economy. B sub point is late to the clash argument. It solves clash because you have chosen the terms of the debate. You just have to defend your representation this scenario because it prevents methodological violence, especially when the one era says extinction is bad, but then says putting animals out of their misery is good, is exactly what prevents these kind of ethical contradictions and supercharges and impacts out our ethics argument. C sub point is that solves predictive because on a restriction topic we should be able to test whether your approach to management good is because otherwise we never be able to test whether or not those anthropocentric frames for managerialism are necessarily good in the context of specific approaches to environmental policy. Even if you don't believe any of these, there are three conceded pieces of impact evidence that'll make this an easy negative ballot versus the rivers of an ontological relationship to nature, prefigure, communicative script that enables the calculative destruction of environment. Their framework reduces debate to its consequences, causes violent subjects who can reappropriate and recreate the terms of environmental engagement in every subsequent debate, which supercharges and proves our anthropocentric argument. B sub point was the Randall's evidence from the 2C that technical focus is semantics that leaves notions of the good life unquestioned, enables the ongoing destruction of the environment in the name of futurity, i.e. turns their naval advantage and constrains rational choices because we always do it on the basis of a future humanity to come that justifies the continued destruction of the cosmos. C sub point is the Athens and evidence read on the all debate in the 2C that says it's all that even if they win the plan in an abstract is good. Athens and evidence indicates that by dwelling first from a position of hopelessness, it enables a form of grieving that bridges the cognitive gap between humanity as an inside and nature as an outside, which solves the entirety of the affirmative, even if it's not a floating pig. Now, if not that, you can still vote on managerialism will cause extinction. The Tomlinson evidence indicates that if you think we are losing certain parts of the argument, that things like drought, famine, disease, species extinction, the dispossessions of millions and sweatshops on the periphery will require the inevitable collapse of civilization and is supercharged by the sort of anthropocentric frames that the 1AC ascribes to, which is a tiebreaker, even if there would some level of overstretch, which doesn't cause exterior violences in the future, but is only predetermined by those very managerial frames extend. The ulterior affirmation of hopelessness is how we dispel the notion of human supremacy by dwelling in a dystopian imaginary. It very reduces and destroys the notion that humans can always exist outside temporal notions, and it shatters the ability for us to create permissible forms of life. It solves the app in two ways. Its point is that hedge and lashed out hegemony is based upon the notion that certain populations can be grouped into categories that are capable for permissible violence, which solves that argument. And Bisa's point is it solves the internal conflict between nature and its outside, which is the root cause of environmental destruction. I'm going to go for one link argument here, which is the subjectivity use of evidence indicates that 1AC bases in this sort of ecological consumption of their ontological relations space, all while weaving in place that the questions of humanism are a product of defined finitude. It weaponizes it for the sake of war and is a sexual obsession with that very form of productivity which denies the ability to intimately relate to the environment. This furthers the belief of ontological supremacy of man and further tends us to fossil fuel consumption. We will just shift from biodegradable fuel standards to other forms of consumption, which makes all of your impacts inevitable, i.e. we will just displace our form of our sacrificial investment in the environment into other places, which causes unending structural violence. Now, their arguments about permutation do both were irrelevant. I answered them above. Even otherwise, the 1 in R4 on permutation evidence is conceded. Code book evidence indicates that their reinvocation of a new humanism is one that emerges out of a state of crisis, is capable of doing the same ecological damage, which is another link to our managerial argument. Their hedge lash-out debate is not possible because you can see that naval hegemony is not key. Naval hegemony is not key to overall hedge, which means that overstretch doesn't solve that, but is an inevitable outcome of endless conflict. No endless war arguments are irrelevant because those are a product of liberalism. We have one that humanism conditions those under the category of submissive violence or subhuman violence, means that you don't have any access to solve yet. We don't try to topple the system. Rather, it's a question of whether or not the alternative first can solve upwards. None of their ethical arguments matter. There's argument about animal life and death as a D rule to vote on ethics. It proves all of our arguments why managerial frames authorize human superiority, even within debate and pedagogical spaces. It's a reason to reject the team because it authorizes the new euthanization of animals, and all of their arguments all prove that the app solves.
Alright. What do we have? 353? 354.
Can I get the text?
gonna be hedge and then okay. Alright. Y'all good to go?
We're not going for the advantage blocks, and we're going to cross off the terminal impact defense, all of the structural violence impacts. We're going to cross off out of Fantastical's question beats. Smokes the two cards, and they send the two and are the global income is increased by 10 times. Global life expectancy is double. Extreme poverty is declining less than 20% of the global population. The murder rates head down by 50%. Literacy rates have increased to 85%. Inequality has also dramatically decreased. All of their generic arguments don't apply here because the Jerome evidence vaguely asserts that Pinker's bad and that we can't objectively assess violence, but they don't have any evidence to suggest that any kind of structural violence is up now, which means you have a high threshold for any of their arguments about why managerialism uniquely causes structural violence and why this quo is uniquely bad, because they don't have any evidence to substantiate any of these claims. You should default affirmative on this question, especially because the Kristoff evidence is comparative to the kinds of claims that Jerome makes. It says that there is a perception that inequality is increased because we're more aware of it, but that perception is flawed and doesn't account for the actual facts of the matter, which means you have a high threshold for any arguments that assert that inequality is up. It doesn't provide you a substantiation of why that's the case. We are the only team that provides statistics about why where wealth inequality is, where global incomes are. We should have a high threshold for any of these arguments. Functions as terminal impact defense. All of their arguments, all of the 200 grandstanding about things like sweatshops should be. You should have a high threshold for any of these arguments because these quo is resolving all of those things. The Horgan and Kristoff evidence also makes a predictive claim that says that all of these trends are on the decline, which means that even if you conclude the sweatshops still exist, which is obviously true, sweatshops are declining and global structural violence is declining, which means you have no reason to think that they access any kind of impact. Here, the critique, at the top, Alex, and the floating pigs theory from the 1AR, because I don't think he answered it only two, and are the floating pigs still the app that is key to fairness. I'm not going to go for it as a reason to reject this team, but they also conceded that it just lets permutation do the alternative, which means it's an easy app ballot here. All explicitly concede their framework interpretation. You should evaluate whether or not management is good or bad, which means just a question of what our relationship with the environment, which means you're going to vote on animal death. Good, I'm kind of sorry about that, but they dropped it. But the argument about ethical contradictions also doesn't apply. The 1AR, the 2AC and 1AR are pretty consistent on this. We said that human extinction was bad, and we even read a card in the 2AC that said you should prioritize preventing the death of humans, but we said that you should kill animals, which is a non-ethical contradiction. We're just making a distinction between the between two forms of life, which means this argument doesn't apply. That's the only relevant argument on framework. All of the impact claims that they have as the 2 and are in the context of either ecological destruction or structural violence. We've read terminal impact gives us structural violence that the negative is responsive to, and we're going to impact on the ecological destruction stuff, so they don't access any unique offense. The and that's good stuff. First, we'll make a few explicit concessions. So we'll concede their impact from humanity is not prior to the rest of nature. Both the 1 and C as well as the 2 and C Deloria evidence say that you should not treat human extinction as an impact or care about the suffering of humans any more than you should care about the suffering of animals. And even if you do think human extinction matters, the 2 and R straight up drops the 1AR stake off card that says biodiversity loss and environmental destruction doesn't cause human extinction, in which they don't access any arguments about human death. And it's just a question of whether or not you think animals should die. The second will also concede the alternative solves environmental destruction. That was a cross-section of the 1 and C and the 2 and C. The alternative creates a bottom of approach is able to reevaluate our relationship to the environment, solve things like warming. I think he had a pretty good explanation of this on the ethics of care stuff in the 2 and C cross-section, though that's able to resolve our approach to climate change. That means the only relevant question your ballot should answer at the end of this debate, whether you think that destruction of the environment is good or bad from a non-anthropocentric viewpoint, which means only the impacts to non-animal suffering are relevant. The 2 and C and 2 and R severely mishandled the piece of Stiller evidence says that environmental destruction is preferable because wild animals live lives of extreme suffering. Nature is a constant torture chamber because animals are constantly starving, dehydrated, or being eaten alive, which means that that's a reason why you should prefer environmental destruction as a form of mercy killing against these animals because because their suffering is so unspeakable. The Stiller evidence is fantastic on this question. They don't have a response to it. The 2 and R just says that this justifies euthanasia and acts like you should think that's a bad thing, but doesn't give a reason why that's the case. We'll say that euthanasia and sterilization are a good thing because the wild animals live lives of unspeakable people suffering. The Tomasic evidence also contextualizes this as that even before animals are born, they experience suffering, which means you should prioritize a elimination of any kind of animal life. The Tomasic evidence also makes a comparative claim that says that the way that their authors frame the perceptions of things like factory farms are skewed because they misunderstand just how bad nature is for the animals that live in it, which means that that's an independent impact framing claim that you can all hang your hat on. The tuner doesn't do any comparative analysis here, means you have a low threshold for all of this, even if you think it's kind of, even if you feel kind of queasy voting on this argument. It's a technical concession because the tuner doesn't do any analysis here. He just asserts that animal death is bad, but doesn't give you a reason why that's the case, which means you should default affirmative on this question. Anything else for the?
Yeah. They conceded the R selection framing, which is that population biology structurally requires an excess of suffering because the vast majority of animals that are ever given birth to die shortly after birth, which means they only experience death, not the value of life.
They've conceded the R selection framing. The similar evidence says that the vast majority of animals who end up being born actually end up dying before they're able to experience any value to life, which means that even if which means that you should prioritize the extinction of animals because that's the only thing that's able to actually prevent any kind of suffering because there's no possible way for animals to access any kind of value to life, which in turn turns the only possible argument he can have for why animal death would be bad, which is that animals could experience some kind of value or that animals have intrinsic value, but that's clearly not the case because they've conceded all of the framing arguments about why animal suffering is so baked into the way that ecosystems function, which means that they don't have any terminal impact events. So the only ethical claim in the round, which means you should default affirmative on this question. Yeah.
Read the Tuisi card. It could not be more explicit. It's directly about ethical orientation towards animals.
Yeah. The Tuisi card is very explicit. Specifically says that destroying biodiverse biomes like deforestation is able to solve that. That's what the alternative solves.
Should I get Mac?
I'm filling out the ballot now, so I should be ready soon. Okay. This was a good debate and I have a lot of comments along the way, but at the end I vote neg and I was kind of just like, what the fuck? Like, why did you kick out of your F? Like, even if you have an impact turn that they conceded, why can't you go for your F and the impact turn? Especially because, like, the 2NR treats it as like, oh, you like drop this Navy stuff so you don't have your advantage anymore, but like missed that you've been extending overstretch as a separate internal link so you can access hedge the whole time. I think that hedge, I do think that the 1AR could have responded to their prompts to get you to be like specify a certain scenario, because in the 2NR when he said, I was going back and forth in my head about how the 2AR would go when the 2AR kind of blew up the hedge impact debate. I was like, how much of it am I going to allow? Because it was in the 1AC, so they should have to answer it. But at the same time, when there's like more analysis on why hedge won't, or why there aren't scenarios for escalation in the block, and the 1AR doesn't have any isolated scenarios for escalation, I was more sympathetic to the negs argument, but I still think like the impact to hedge is so big that why not weigh it against the F, especially that it's mostly conceded. And the neg is not taking a position at any point in the debate on hedge. Like, they're kind of like, oh, this is a floating pick. How are you a pick that solves the K and solves hedge? That's what I want to know. Like, why don't you make them force them to specify their relationship to hegemony? Like, it's weird that you all don't say hedge is unethical at any point in this debate, and you just say that their framing of managerialism is inevitable. There's nothing unique about like unipolar domination that's unethical. Like, you're okay with unipolar domination, but you're not okay with managerialism. So I think that the problem with the AF strategy, obviously, other than at the end you don't have any of the AF left, is that you're going full course for this internal link turn to anthro, but the internal link turn to anthro doesn't answer their managerialism claims. So it's sort of like if their impact was just like anthropocentrism and human superiority is the worst because it causes suffering to animals, then this would be a direct internal link turn. But their scenarios is like managerialism will lead to extinction. And so there's not a warrant for why ending the suffering of animals by causing the extinction of animals really quick is going to solve the internal link to planetary extinction. Obviously this is a late breaking turn, but a floating question that remains is like, how would humans survive without any animals? And also, I think that a move that the 2AR could have potentially made, and I was thinking about this, to make this impact turn completely offensive is like, if they're saying the binary between humans and animals is one that should be removed, then your claims about animals being always in a state of suffering also applies to human animals, not just non-human animals. So I thought you might take it the extra step and say, like, we concede the disads, we lead to extinction, we solve suffering of all animals through extinction. Now, the reason that I'm thinking this would be weird is because it's clearly a double turn with the AF and the cross-X of the 1AC when they said, like, what is extinction? And you're like, when nothing on life, like, we solve extinction, meaning there's no life on Earth anymore. Like, everyone on Earth dies. So is it a double turn to read this evidence and change your orientation towards suffering and extinction midway through the round? I think that given that they didn't make it's a double turn argument, it would have at least made me pause more at the end of the debate about your strategic moves in the 2AR and strategic concessions based on them not answering this turn. But I think that even if I give you full weight to this turn, it's like at the end of the day, your impact is animal suffering, and there's no explanation of the internal link between animal suffering and planetary extinction or human extinction, and they're still going for human extinction impacts. Like, managerialism leads to human extinction and reifies like capitalism and structural violence and stuff. So it's just when they have DAs that have multiple impacts, this is why going for hedge would be just strategic in this case, because hedge can just outweigh some of these different scenarios. And then you can say the fact that we have this conceded scenario about animal suffering means that we have the best ethical orientation, right, which meets your framework of having like an ethics, but we also control the internal link to violence better through hegemony rather than, like, basically the managerialism of hegemony is worth the risk that managerialism leads to extinction when we're winning that hegemony contains conflicts, right? So if managerialism inevitably, just think of it as like the basic hedge is a controller or a controlling impact in the sense of when you go for hedge even against policy impacts, all the policy impacts can be true about escalation, but hedge controls that final escalation to global power wars. So if managerialism leads to conflict, sure, conflict is inevitable, concede that, and say that having a unipolarity is the only way to check that conflict from escalating, proven by like since 1991, we've had, more stability than when we had a bipolar order, for example. We were always at a higher risk of great power wars during the Cold War than in an era of unipolarity, for example. So, I mean, I was very surprised when the 2AR said that they weren't going for the advantage, especially because the block, I thought the block was like okay on, I was glad that you had some like defense against hedge, but I do think that rather than trying to go for these like internal link or hedge inevitable, just have some like impact turns to hedge on case. Like hedge is bad, hedge is unethical, like hedge like leads to intervention. So like when they said hedge solves genocide and then there was a cross-X, I thought you were gonna impact turn that in the block and be like hedge actually is genocide, like hedge leads to genocide, like hedge makes genocide possible because it means that the United States gets to extend their security umbrella over any genocidal actor that gives the U.S. a strategic geopolitical advantage in the region. So if you all have any questions about the decision, I can take those first, but then I have some like general comments too.
Yeah, so for like the Tomlinson evidence on like managerialism leads to extinction, I read that as like an internal link of like environmental collapse causes extinction. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, and I guess that your impact turn wasn't really like we solve environmental collapse. It's just like environmental collapse or some level of environmental collapse, like environmental extinction is good.
Yeah.
It wasn't like an internal link turn to environmental collapse. It was just a straight impact turn.
Okay. So how do you think we could frame the like 2AR more clearly as like an argument that environmental collapse is good, or like framing it in a way that like is, I guess, more responsive than the comments?
I mean, I do think that the negative, one thing that I was going to point out is like the negative needs to alter your strategy more to not assume that the AF is all about protecting the environment. Like, I kept getting the vibe that you all were like, protecting the environment is bad, protecting the environment is bad, but like they're trying to patrol and protect the international order of humans, of humanism, right? Not the environment. So I do think that in terms of environment, just outweigh it with hedge. Be like, whatever, like the environment is terminally fucked. Like, you're right, Trump is gonna fuck it over, which is a reason why, while the environment is still like hospitable to us, we should prevent nuclear war. Just like scenarios will come first. Like, China's on the rise, like this nationalism argument. Just make the impact come first. Be like, they're banning shit. Be like, that provides a threshold. That means that we're on the brink of conflict. Bannon's about to initiate this conflict. If we don't have a military that can check conflict when Trump says stupid shit that causes escalation, then that China war will inevitably escalate instead of be contained by the military. So I would just say hedge outweighs the environment. And then also you're like, war turns the environment. I think you slipped that in the 2AC. They didn't really answer this on the K. So just like they're going for sequencing arguments, go for sequencing arguments. Be like, yes, the environment is bad, but if we drop a nuclear if we drop nuclear bombs and have a nuclear exchange with China, that's gonna one step forward to take 10 steps back. You know, how is nuclear war going to affect the regime of clean energy? And also, in a post-nuclear war scenario, are any nations actually gonna care about adhering to Paris when we're trying to like create like a new League of Nations after a world war or something? Like, I don't know.
Okay. I had 2 questions.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, my understanding of the RFD is largely they win the managerialism impact that there's a human extinction DA to the F. I guess, why does that outweigh the impact terms? Because it seems like a pretty consistent thread of the negative that we're conceding is human extinction isn't more important than the rest of nature, and that impacts of nature should outweigh.
Well, it's just like a question of that work wasn't done for me for me to understand. Like, since that both teams, the entire debate until the 2AR, have both operated under the understanding that we should stop human extinction, right? Like, even the cross-ex of the 1AC. Like,
even the negative is saying we should stop human extinction?
Both the AF and the NEG have agreed up until the 2AR that we should like stop human extinction, right? So it just means more weighing of why is suffering a D rule? Like, why is animal suffering come first automatically?
Didn't they read multiple, like, that is, 2AC overview is a card that says human extinction, not relevant, animals come first.
But I'm saying that they have human and animal extinction as their impact.
Right.
At the end, yours is just animal extinction good. Their extinction scenario covers that too. Like, it's extinction of everything.
Right.
So.
But half that extinction scenario is the animals dying, which you said is good. It's not like them encompassing animal extinction would be the thing that would impact her. I don't understand why that would like solve it.
Oh yeah, because you're saying that they saved the animals. Well, I mean, I guess it's just, for me, there wasn't an explicit argument made that like suffering of animals should be prioritized over extinction claims. Like, what's the warrant for why suffering of animals should be evaluated first? Like, especially when it's such a late-breaking argument. Like, if you know there's a potential for you going for this and only this and kicking the AF and the 2AR, the 1AR needs to set up like this is a prerequisite impact claim to solve for.
What about cross-ex of like the 1NC when we're asking them about their like the ethical importance of animals and such? It seems pretty clear and even crossing to the one instance, they're saying humans no more important than animals. We need to reject that.
Yeah, but they want to save humans and animals.
Right.
Right?
But of the two, they're saying humans should take priority, and we're impact turning the one that they say is more important. It seems like everything up to this point in the debate, the negative is saying animals matter more than humans.
But you all don't even say this in the 1AR or 2AR. Like, you're trying to post round, like, concede one of their framing arguments and get me to, like, conceptualize it that way. But if you're making that strategic move, then you should have said in the 1AR, like, they make the argument that animal life is more prioritized than human life. We're conceding this strategically. We're the only ones who immediately end suffering of animal life. Like that.
Not enough in the 2AR to explain that? As of the
Well, the 2AR didn't do it either.
Okay. And the other argument...
the 2AR just explained it as an internal link turn to environmental destruction. Like, the 2AR did not explain it as suffering as a D-roll. The 2AR was like, since the only impact that they extend is environmental destruction, which I don't think that is the only impact, actually, then we're going to win because we have an internal link turn to this. Like, that's how the 2AR was framed. Not like suffering should come first because of negative arguments.
Okay.
Yeah.
Another question I had was the Sagoff card. In the 1AR, I don't think it was answered, and then in the 2AR it's extended is like, even if 99.9% of environments lost, humans would survive. It would seem to be impact defense to the extinction thing. Do you think?
I mean, it could
The
be.
part that is relevant here, which is the Thomas evidence.
Yeah. I mean, it could be relevant, but again, like, that wasn't an argument that was made in the 2AR.
You didn't have that either.
Well, I mean, I didn't have that as a reason why no, like, on my flow, I don't have the Thomason evidence as a reason why I shouldn't evaluate. I wasn't saying earlier, when I was talking about the looming question of can humans exist without animals, I wasn't saying I gave them that argument, right? I wasn't saying I, like, made an internal link for them that animal extinction would lead to human extinction.
Okay.
That was just a question that I said that was, like, looming and obviously should have been answered. But I didn't vote because of that.
So is there an extinction scenario independent of environmental collapse that would not read defense to?
Well, I mean, they claim that managerialism is, the internal link for humanism, and that this biopolitics of control leads to, like, surveillance regimes, which, I mean, again, if the AF went for the AF in this round, it would have been much harder for me to resolve this debate because the neg impacts are a little bit unclear, like what impacts you're going for.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Okay.
A couple things. The negatives critique, it seems like a double turn to me, because it seems like your description of the alt and the telos of the alt and the cross-X seem to double turn the hopelessness of the alt, because your stance from the beginning is that if we affirm hopelessness, we can break down the myth of human supremacy, ... to give us hope in a better form of management, which sounds like mastery to me, because why, like, you're basically hopeful that hopelessness will become a prerequisite to a better form of hopefulness, which it seemed like, and his sort of arguments against the permutation that the perm is managerial because it's doing all of this like techno-strategic stuff. That's what the alt is doing. Like, he's basically making these, like, techno-strategic arguments that, like, oh, it's all about the prerequisite question, right? So it's all about you reading the 1 and C first, and then you can do hedge, right? It's all about you considering your relationship to non-human animals, but then as soon as you do that, you can solve hedge, right? So, and then I think that the negative block, like, it made me feel that even more, because the neg doesn't have, like, a pessimistic affect at all. I don't feel any hopelessness coming from the neg, and, like, even though you want me to vote for an orientation of hopelessness, why are you like so hopeful that your alt can solve and that there's no world in which extinction might just be inevitable, right? I feel like that should be a component of the alt. Like extinction might be fucking inevitable, so it's how we orient ourselves towards each other as individuals in the here and now, because we never know. We can't master. There's global warming happening on Mars too. Like we can say that global warming is anthropogenic, but we also don't fucking know if global warming could be because of universe, like causes outside of humans that aren't humanistic, right? Like there are 3 mass extinctions on Earth before humans came here.
Right.
They had to do with global warming. I think you should talk about that and talk about how even if humans accelerate global warming, the idea that humans can master the Earth to the point where we can restore an order that never existed even before humans got here is what you're talking about, right? And so sort of I would like the negative to like either change your alternative to something that like is hopeful about solving so it's in line with your ethos, or embrace the hopelessness that your alternative cards talk about.
So I think you're 100% correct. Part of the reason we framed the alt this way is because I thought we could go for the pick. Like if we lose the alt, because there's like the critiques of like eco-nihilism, all of that stuff. We wanted to try to maybe strategically place it in a way so it's like it's just a pick out of the reps.
Yeah.
Like we think that's not.
That would work against soft left AFs or environment AFs, but hedge, like why do you want the option to pick? Like that's what I'm wondering. Like why would you ever want to solve hedge in the world of your alt? Like it just seems, and the same thing with the perm. I just feel like you're wasting time with these like no perm arguments. Like I don't believe in no perm. Like it's not like I'm saying there's no chance that the neg team could ever win no perm, but like just win mutual exclusivity arguments. Like your managerialism, your hopefulness, your managerialism, we're a refusal of that managerialism, a recognition of the chaotic nature of being human, an ethical relation within that chaos, and fuck hedge. Like we can go for impact turns to hedge even if we lose the all, and then just invest on hedge impact turns, like so Matt can do like coloniality case stuff in the 1NR. Just like no, it's not hedge, it's colonialism. You're not only normalizing Trump, which I think could have been a part of the 2NR maybe, but also maybe conceptualizing how to fold this into your case so it's not something like separate, right? So it could be more easily gone for in the 2NR. But not only are you normalizing like Trump, but you're normalizing like hedge and domination, like, and the idea that the U.S. military solves genocide, like the normalization of that concept is something that should be ethically rejected. Like different ways to get in on the by even calling it hegemony, you're normalizing colonialism, you could say, right? Because like you're putting this professional term on what really is genocide, right? Like there's not even a mention that when they say like hedge solves genocide, that like a genocide was the precondition for U.S. hegemony in the first place.
Sure.
I had one other question.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think of the floating pick argument? Am I wrong that it was dropped?
It was dropped, and I did think that 1AR should have gone for vague alts because first of all, it was dropped. Second of all, they did kind of moving target their alt in the block. Like the alt was that's up for debate, but the alt has this like new orientation of ethics which wasn't really present in the 1NC. And then I am sympathetic to vague alternatives. Like if the negative is going to have like an alternative that they say is going to solve, they should be clear about it, what it is in the 1NC. The floating picks thing, in the 2AR it was just floating picks kill fairness. We're not going for it. And that's another moment when I was like, you're not going for it? Like, why? It was dropped. Like, another, like, opportunity. Like, the 2AR is just, like, all the opportunities to, like, win this debate, we're not going to go for them. But you just said it justifies perm do the alt, and that's just, like, defense, so.
So I guess I'm confused. Like, if we win permutation to the alternative, why doesn't that mean you put F?
Because they're winning disads to the F.
But the perm is just the alt. It seems like essentially a severance perm in my mind. not really being answered. Whereas like floating pick means perm to the alt.
Perms are a test of competition to me. Like if you win the perm, I still evaluate the DAs against the AF, and you're still losing DAs against the AF.
Okay. In that context, are those DAs unique if you think the perm gets rid of the alt? Like, what's the unique DA to the F then?
The managerialism stuff.
Okay.
Wait, be careful. In the cross-ex, you said values and things that matter don't matter, which was a value claim. 2AC, you need specific alt doesn't solve, and this isn't just like you need a card every single time that you hit a different K, but you need to cater your 2AC, like instead of just reading generic alt doesn't solve because it's utopian, it's fine to read that, but also just say like the alt doesn't solve the K impacts, and then make like a logical argument for why like the alternative that they present, why there's like a disconnect between the alternative they present and the K that they present. Or else like this is just a classic Clash of Civilization problem that AFs end up having, is that like they end up winning a large part of the AF, but then they concede that the K solves that the K alt solves the K, never concede that the K alt solves the K, like, because it doesn't. Like, if it did, like, we probably wouldn't be in the situation where they were critiquing, right? So, make more specific alt doesn't solve arguments. And, yeah. The 1AR, oh yeah. The, I think I already said this, but the impact turns on the K, yeah, I already said that. No, that's fine. Alright. Any other questions?
2NC block organization, I mean, like, was it flowable? Was it, I felt like it was my first 2NC of the day, so it's like.
Well, I mean, I've kind of given up on flowing line by line in general. But
I tried to still be like framework debate, link debate,
yeah.
debate, but
I mean, I did think it was kind of weird that you were like, go to the K and don't put an overview on it. But then, like, when I got all the way down to the page, you're like, framework. And then I was like, well, I mean, why did I not, like, I shouldn't have fallen for that, because every time the 2NC says don't put an overview, they're always lying. But, I mean, let me see. I mean, I think the order of the block is good enough, but just communicate better so you don't have to take prep before the 1NR in terms of like what is the 1NR going to take if they have to answer anything on the perm. And also figure out like the theory arguments. I would say like just have one person answer all the theory arguments and get it out of the way. Like you could have just, after framework, you should have just, I think you should have just answered vague alts and floating picks right after framework just to get it out of the way.
right.